Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack the astonishing rise and spectacular ruin of the Dutch East India Company. It is, without a doubt, the ultimate corporate cautionary tale. We're looking at a deeply fascinating piece of history that essentially pioneered the way our modern world does business. But more importantly, it shows us exactly how unchecked power, immense distance, and institutional greed can destroy an absolute empire from the inside out. Let's get right into it.
Okay, we have to start by talking about the unimaginable scale of this operation. At its absolute peak back in 1637, this single company was valued at an $8.28 trillion equivalent in today's money. To put that into perspective for you, that is more than the market caps of Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, and Google combined. We're talking about a single profit-driven entity wielding the gross domestic product of modern Germany, the UK, and France added together. It was an absolute behemoth that dictated global trade.
Which naturally begs the ultimate question, doesn't it? How did a company possessing that much wealth, literally the richest company in human history, manage to rot from the inside out and completely bankrupt itself?
Section 1. The first megacorporation.
To really understand the rot, we first have to examine the unprecedented rise of this corporate titan, starting with its founding in 1602. Before the Dutch East India Company, or the VOC as it was known in Dutch, business just wasn't done this way. They racked up an incredible list of corporate firsts. They were the first publicly traded company, the first true multinational corporation, and they even had the first globally recognizable corporate logo branded onto everything from cannons to coins. By raising 6.5 million guilders on the newly formed Amsterdam Stock Exchange, they pioneered the corporate structure we see everywhere today. They literally democratized business ownership. For the very first time, ordinary citizens could purchase shares and get in on the astronomical reward of global trade. And wow, the financial returns for those everyday citizens were absolutely staggering. The VOC was governed by a 17-member board of directors, known as the Gentlemen's 17. Under their highly centralized management, share values exploded by 200% in just 4 years by 1606. By 1610, they were paying out their first dividends. It was basically a gold rush, driving an absolute frenzy of investment and establishing Amsterdam as the unquestioned cradle of global share trading.
Section 2, Pioneering Permanent Capital.
But what truly set the VOC apart from its European competitors wasn't just the sheer amount of cash they raised. It was a massive legal innovation regarding how they actually kept it. By the 17th century, the VOC was absolutely dominating their rivals. They were sending more ships to Asia than all other European countries combined, accounting for a massive 55% of the total European fleet operating in Asian waters. But building and maintaining a permanent fleet like that requires an absolute ocean of capital. So the real secret sauce to their success is a concept called capital lock-in. Before the VOC, maritime trade was based on single voyages. You put your money in, a ship sails, and when it comes back, you get your profits and your initial capital returned. But the VOC introduced a radical legal shift. Investors could no longer withdraw their funds. By joining, you waived your right to pull your initial capital out, which gave the VOC a permanent, untouchable pool of money to play with. If you suddenly needed your cash back, well, the company wouldn't give it to you. You had to go find a buyer and sell your shares to someone else. This legal innovation provided a massive, unassailable strategic advantage. The VOC officially locked in its capital permanently by 1612. Meanwhile, their rivals, like the English East India Company, were operating under a highly volatile political system where the king could just expropriate funds. So the English were stuck relying on short-term, voyage-by-voyage funding all the way until 1657. Because the VOC had guaranteed permanent capital, they could confidently invest in massive, long-term strategies, building a permanent fleet in Asia while everyone else was left scrambling just to catch up.
Section 3, The Dark Side of Monopoly.
Now, we absolutely cannot talk about the VOC's incredible rise without looking at the horrifying human cost of enforcing this unprecedented monopoly. You see, the VOC wasn't just a business importing spices. It was a ruthless quasi-state actor. Their foundational charter granted them terrifying sovereign powers. They literally had the authority to wage wars, sign treaties, completely govern overseas colonies, maintain their own private standing armies, mint their own currency, and even execute convicts. This is a level of corporate power that is simply unimaginable today. They were an empire unto themselves, unchecked by any traditional state oversight. Operating with that unchecked authority and the pursuit of absolute profit led to unspeakable atrocities. In 1621, Governor-General Jan Pieterszoon Koon ordered the violent military conquest of the Banda Islands. The reason was brutally simple. Those islands were the world's only natural source of nutmeg and mace, which were worth their weight in gold back in Europe. To secure a total monopoly, the VOC systematically decimated a civilization of 15,000 people. It was a calculated genocide, orchestrated not by a nation-state, but by a publicly traded corporation, strictly to maximize its profit margins.
Section 4. Perishing under corruption. So this unchecked power, combined with thousands of miles of ocean separating the operations from the board in Amsterdam, eventually bred a deep internal rot. The corruption ran so deep that Dutch citizens joked the VOC acronym actually stood for Vergaan under corruption, perished under corruption. By the 1750s, facing a serious capital shortage, the board dramatically slashed official salaries for all their overseas agents. But to keep those agents from quitting, they essentially endorsed mass embezzlement. One 18th century official literally admitted in writing that because they didn't pay their staff enough to live on, it was absolutely necessary to purposefully look the other way when officials used company resources for private gain. This created a fatal, unstoppable domino effect for the corporation. You've got a capital shortage, so you slash pay. To compensate angry employees, you effectively legalize private trading under the VOC flag. This completely institutionalized a culture of corruption from the top down. Officials quickly realized they could make a fortune by prioritizing their own side deals over the company's official business. They were using the company's massively expensive infrastructure to run their own private smuggling rings. And once corruption becomes expected and self-reinforcing in a system like that, it leads straight down the path to total bankruptcy. What is truly wild, though, is how incredibly long they managed to hide this systemic rot from the public back in Europe. They kept up this brilliant facade of immense wealth, actually borrowing money just to pay out massive 18% dividends as late as 1781. But the internal reality was a disaster. By the end, departing VOC ships were filled almost entirely with the private, smuggled goods of corrupt officials enriching themselves, leaving the official corporate cargo holds virtually empty. It got so absurd that the VOC was eventually reduced to trying to formally tax the blatant graft of its own employees just to keep the lights on.
Section 5. A modern corporate legacy.
Eventually, you just can't outrun that staggering level of internal theft. The very foundation of the world's wealthiest entity was destroyed. Plagued by this endemic corruption, bleeding cash to maintain private armies, and battered by new competition, the grand illusion finally shattered. Unable to service its monumental debts, the VOC was nationalized in 1795, and then, going out with a whimper rather than a bang, on the absolute last day of the 18th century, December 31st, 1799, the VOC was officially dissolved forever.
The VOC invented the modern corporate structure, revolutionized global finance, and built a globe-spanning, untouchable monopoly, only to be completely consumed by its own greed. As we step back and analyze the trillion-dollar megacorporations controlling our global economy today, companies wielding immense data, political influence, and vast resources, we are left with a pretty vital question to consider. Are they truly immune to this exact same cycle of unchecked power, structural distance, and systemic corruption? It's definitely something to think about the next time you hear about a modern corporate monopoly expanding its reach. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the structures around you.